For years, she was called the homewrecker, the villain in someone else's love story. But what if everything we thought we knew about Arian Curry was a lie? The internet has a long memory, especially when it comes to reality TV drama. Few scandals have flared and lingered quite like the saga of Martell Holt, his ex-wife Melody Holt, and the woman the world branded the ultimate homewrecker, Arian Curry. For years, Arian carried the villain's crown, the woman blamed for the fall of a picture-perfect marriage. But recently, the narrative has started to shift. The cracks in the story everyone thought they knew are beginning to show, and this time, Arian is finally speaking for herself. It all began with Love and Marriage, Huntsville, a series celebrating Black excellence, ambition, and love. Martell and Melody Holt were the faces of success, building a real estate business, raising a beautiful family, and embodying faith and perseverance. But the glossy image couldn't withstand the weight of reality. When infidelity came to light, Arian's name became synonymous with scandal. She wasn't just linked to the affair, she became its face. Online, the reaction was swift and merciless. Arian was branded every name in the book: side chick, mistress, concubine. The internet dissected her every move, turning her into a symbol of betrayal. Meanwhile, Martell, the man equally involved, managed to weather the storm with far less damage. The double standard was impossible to ignore. He was a man who had made mistakes. She was a woman condemned. But here's the truth about public stories. They're often one-sided. For years, Arian had no real platform to defend herself. The show gave the Holts the microphone, while she was left to fend for herself online. Social media became both her refuge and her battlefield, a space that amplified her voice even as it magnified the hate directed at her. When people began calling her a concubine, it crossed a line. That word wasn't just another insult. It was a dehumanizing label, one that stripped her of dignity and reduced her to an object. After enduring years of relentless ridicule, Arian finally reached her breaking point. Her emotional outburst on Instagram Live wasn't a performance, it was a release. "I'm tired of being disrespected," she cried, her voice trembling with exhaustion and anger. "Y'all call me a concubine like I'm not human. Like I didn't have real feelings for that man. You think I wanted this? I was lied to, manipulated, and used. But somehow I'm the only one carrying the shame." Those words hit differently. They weren't coming from a defiant other woman, but from a woman who'd been living under the weight of public judgment for years, vulnerable, honest, human. The internet's reaction this time was split. Some dismissed her emotional confession as a stunt, a bid to stay relevant. Others heard the raw pain behind her words and questioned whether the years of collective condemnation had gone too far, and that's where things get interesting, because Arian's outburst wasn't just another reality TV moment. It marked the beginning of something bigger, the rewriting of her own story, in her own words. In recent years, Martell Holt has been on a mission to rewrite his own story. He's focused on business ventures, promoting his role as a devoted father, and presenting himself as a man transformed by hardship. The redemption arc is clear, a careful reinvention designed to leave the chaos of his past behind. But Arian Curry's return to the spotlight threatens to shatter that fragile reconstruction, pulling Martell back into the scandal he's spent years trying to bury. And that's where things get complicated. Is Arian's resurgence a sincere attempt to reclaim her voice and find closure? Or is it a strategic move, a calculated bid to leverage the infamy she never asked for but now owns? The truth, as always, lives somewhere in the messy middle. Rumors began circulating almost immediately. Whispers claimed that Arian was in discussions with major production companies, the kind known for turning tarnished reputations into redemption stories and chaos into compelling television. They offered her something she had never truly been granted: unfiltered access to her own narrative. The cost? Total transparency. The promise? A chance to finally tell her truth, uncut and unscripted. For years, Arian's identity existed in Martell's shadow. But now, she had the opportunity to define herself on her own terms. Still, the offer came with a heavy price tag. Full exposure meant every secret, regret, and whispered conversation could be dissected and broadcast to the world. Unsurprisingly, Martell was not amused. Insiders claim his initial reaction was a cocktail of anger and desperation. He allegedly reached out to Arian, not just as a former lover, but as the mother of his child, urging her to reconsider. He reminded her of their shared history, of the family ties that still bound them, and of how much damage public revelations could inflict. But Arian, it seemed, was done letting him dictate the rules. The balance of power had shifted. For the first time, she held the cards, or at least she believed she did. The only question was how far she was willing to play them, and what truths she was prepared to uncover. Speculation intensified when Arian was spotted meeting with a prominent attorney, a woman known for representing high-profile figures in messy, high-stakes disputes. The rumor mill went into overdrive. Was Arian preparing to take legal action against Martell, planning to expose financial secrets, or simply protecting herself before stepping into the media firestorm she was about to ignite? Meanwhile, Melody Holt, ever the strategist, chose silence. She had built her empire on grace under pressure and knew better than to feed the narrative Arian was reviving. Instead, Melody doubled down on her businesses and her image as a self-made success story, subtly reminding the world that she had moved on and was thriving. Yet even she couldn't ignore the growing storm. If Arian revealed new details that reframed the entire scandal, Melody's carefully constructed brand could take a hit. Everyone, it seemed, had something to lose. Martell risked his rebuilt image. Melody risked her narrative. And Arian, she risked everything: her reputation, her privacy, and perhaps her peace of mind. The stage was set. The tension was thick. Cameras were ready, and the world waited to see what Arian Curry would do next. Would she finally find her redemption, or become the architect of her own undoing? The lawyer's office was sleek and sterile, all glass, chrome, and muted tones. Arian sat across from her attorney, Ms. Stern, wearing a power suit that felt like armor she hadn't quite grown into. The air buzzed with quiet intensity. "Martell Holt has resources," Ms. Stern warned, her tone cool and measured. "He'll fight to protect his image and his money. If you go public, you need to be ready for a legal war." Arian's hands trembled slightly in her lap. The thought of facing Martell, the man who had once held so much control over her life, in a courtroom was terrifying. But the alternative, continuing to live under his version of the story, was worse. For the first time, Arian understood that silence was no longer her safety. It was her cage. "I have to," Arian whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. "I can't keep living like this." And with those words, the decision was made. The tell-all interview was officially greenlit. A major streaming platform had extended an offer that was impossible to ignore: full creative control, a life-changing payout, and, most importantly, a global stage. For Arian, it wasn't just a deal. It was a lifeline, a chance to finally rewrite her story, to be seen as something more than a scandal's shadow. The filming process was brutal. Hours upon hours of interviews chipped away at the emotional armor she'd built over the years. The questions were sharp, the silences even sharper. Still, Arian refused to hold back. She spoke with a clarity that could only come from years of bottled pain. She detailed her relationship with Martell, the charm, the deceit, the emotional manipulation that blurred love and control until they became indistinguishable. She painted a portrait of a man who thrived on power, one who could spin accountability into blame and betrayal into justification. Yet, she didn't shy away from her own reflection in the chaos. For the first time, Arian acknowledged her role in the destruction. She admitted to poor choices, to hurting Melody, to staying in a situation that eroded her sense of self. Her vulnerability was both strategic and sincere, a delicate balance between survival and truth. She wasn't just telling her story, she was reclaiming her humanity. When Arian Speaks finally aired, the internet erupted. Within hours, it became the most talked about interview in streaming history. Supporters called her courageous, finally brave enough to confront years of shame. Critics, meanwhile, dismissed her as manipulative, accusing her of repackaging old wounds for fame and fortune. Martell's response was swift and predictable. He released a public statement denying her claims, accusing her of twisting facts for attention and hinting at legal action. But Ms. Stern, ever the strategist, was prepared for the blowback. Every document, every recording, every thread of evidence had been meticulously cataloged. Melody Holt, on the other hand, maintained her silence. She knew there was nothing to gain by engaging. For a woman who had built her reputation on grace, resilience, and the art of turning pain into power, silence was her strongest statement. Publicly, she smiled, effortlessly poised, her social media a curated reflection of success. Privately, though, she watched. Her team monitored hashtags, sentiment graphs, and trending clips. Every spike in Arian's name was a potential ripple in her own empire. Melody had learned long ago that in the court of public opinion, narratives are currency. She'd invested years in controlling hers, the wronged wife, the survivor, the businesswoman who rose from the ashes of betrayal. Arian's tell-all threatened to disrupt that, because if Arian's version gained traction, it wouldn't just challenge Martell's reputation, it could call into question the story Melody had built her brand on. And in an industry where authenticity sells but perception reigns supreme, even the faintest crack in a narrative could cost millions. So, she did what she'd always done best. She worked. Melody doubled down on her brand deals, expanded her skincare line, filmed new content for her YouTube channel, and teased another business venture. Each move was deliberate, a chess player advancing pawns while the crowd's attention fixated on someone else's storm. Yet those close to her said the tension was palpable. In quiet moments, she'd scroll through the trending clips of Arian Speaks, pausing on snippets where Arian's voice wavered, not out of pity, but calculation. Every revelation had implications. Every claim required analysis. Melody knew that if Arian's story stuck, it could rewrite the very mythology that made love and marriage, Huntsville, what it was. Meanwhile, the public's reaction to Arian's tell-all was a paradox of empathy and outrage. Social media became an arena of conflicting emotions. On one side were the skeptics, those who saw Arian's tears as performative, her timing as opportunistic. On the other, an emerging chorus of supporters praised her for her vulnerability. "I used to hate her," one viewer wrote in a viral tweet. "But now, I kind of get it. She didn't ruin that marriage alone." Another comment, buried deep in a Reddit thread, summed it up more bluntly. "Everybody's mad at the mistress, but no one's talking about the man who made the promises." The noise online was deafening. Hashtags trended for days. Podcasts dissected every sentence, and think pieces sprouted across digital platforms. What had started as a reality TV scandal had evolved into a cultural conversation about double standards, womanhood, and the unforgiving nature of fame. For Arian, the experience was dizzying. In the weeks following the interview, her phone became both her lifeline and her tormentor. One moment, she'd receive a message from a stranger thanking her for speaking out, a single mother who'd once been the other woman, or a woman who'd survived emotional manipulation. The next, she'd open a DM laced with hate, threats, and the kind of cruelty that anonymity enables. But beneath the chaos, something in her shifted. For years, Arian had been the silent subject of other people's narratives, flattened into a caricature, her humanity stripped for headlines. Now, even if imperfectly, she was seen. The uncertainty lingered, though. Had she gone too far? Had she exposed herself to a backlash she couldn't contain? Public sympathy is a fickle tide, generous one moment, punishing the next. And Arian knew how easily the same audience that applauded her vulnerability could turn on her again. But this time she was prepared. She had a team now, a publicist, a media strategist, and of course Mrs. Stern, the lawyer whose calm efficiency had become Arian's anchor in the storm. Together, they crafted a plan, measured, careful, yet defiant. No more reactive posts, no impulsive live streams. Arian's next moves would be intentional. There were whispers of a documentary deal, a book proposal, and even early talks of launching a podcast where women could share their own unfiltered stories. And yet, for all the newfound control, Arian couldn't shake the weight of what she'd unleashed. Fame, and even the rebranded kind, came with a price. Paparazzi followed her to coffee shops. Her daughter's school had to implement new security measures. Privacy, once her refuge, had evaporated. One night, alone in her apartment, she scrolled through the endless storm of comments. Between the vitriol and the praise, one simple message stood out. "Thank you for being human." It was from someone she didn't know. And yet it stayed with her, echoing louder than all the noise. Meanwhile, Martell's camp went into full crisis mode. His legal team drafted cease and desist letters, and his PR handlers began spinning. In interviews, he deflected with polished charm, referring to Arian's words as misunderstandings and emotionally charged interpretations. But behind closed doors, Insiders said he was furious, pacing, shouting, desperate to regain control. The empire he'd been rebuilding was cracking at the edges, and Melody? She stayed silent, just as she had from the start. But silence in this case wasn't absence, it was dominance. Every post of hers, every image of her working, smiling, succeeding, became a subtle reminder of who had truly survived the chaos. Still, there were moments, fleeting, private, when she felt the unease. The realization that no matter how far she'd come, the past had a way of finding new life. The story had become more than personal scandal. It was a study in reputation, how it's built, how it breaks, and how in the digital age, it's never fully yours to own. For Arian, redemption was a moving target. Some days she felt liberated, finally free of the shame that had clung to her for years. Other days, the backlash made her question whether speaking out had been worth it at all. But through the exhaustion, one truth remained constant. She had reclaimed her agency. She had told her truth, not as a footnote, but as a full chapter. Months later, when the noise began to fade and the next scandal took center stage, Arian found herself sitting in quiet reflection. Her story hadn't ended. It had evolved. She wasn't the villain or the victim anymore. She was something messier, more real, a woman trying to find peace after years of being everyone else's storyline. And in that fragile quiet, she realized something profound. Control doesn't always mean victory. Sometimes it simply means choosing your own voice over someone else's version of you. For the first time in years, Arian felt the stillness of self-acceptance, not the kind that begged for validation, but the kind that simply was. She no longer needed to defend every decision, explain every emotion, or justify her existence in the court of public opinion. The noise had defined her for so long that silence now felt revolutionary. It wasn't peace exactly, more like the pause between storms, but it was hers. In the weeks that followed, Arian began rebuilding quietly. She found solace in her daughter's laughter, in long walks without her phone, in the small rituals that reminded her she was more than her mistakes. Therapy became a safe space, not a confession booth, but a mirror. She began to see how much of her worth had been tied to how others perceived her. Martell's gaze, the internet's judgment, the show's edit. Bit by bit, she started dismantling that dependence. There were days when doubt crept back in, when she'd scroll through old comments, reliving the sting of every insult, every meme that mocked her pain. But this time, she stopped herself from spiraling. She reminded herself that growth isn't linear, that healing sometimes means revisiting old wounds just to realize they no longer control you. She started journaling again, scribbling raw thoughts in the margins of a worn leather notebook. Her entries weren't about regret, but recognition, an acknowledgement of how far she'd come. "I used to think I needed the world to understand me," she wrote one night, "but I was really just trying to understand myself." She began cooking again, rediscovering the rhythm of stirring, chopping, tasting, the simple meditative rituals that reconnected her to the present. Her daughter would sit on the counter, giggling as flour dusted the floor. Those moments, unfilmed, unseen, unjudged, reminded Arian what real life looked like. Whether Arian would emerge renewed or ruined, only time would tell. Public memory was unpredictable, and fame, even infamy, was a fickle currency. But one truth was undeniable. She had faced the storm, not as a headline, not as a caricature, but as herself. In an industry built on illusion, she had chosen reality. And though that choice came with scars, it also came with freedom, the kind that couldn't be scripted or staged. She'd learned that redemption wasn't about convincing others to forgive her. It was about forgiving herself. The game, as always, wasn't over. But this time, for the first time, Arian Curry wasn't just a player. She was the one rewriting the rules, not for applause, not for revenge, but to reclaim the life she lost in someone else's story. And as the world watched, she finally understood. Her power wasn't in being perfect. It was in being real. That realization didn't erase the past, but it reframed it. Every mistake, every cruel headline, every tear had led her here, to a place where she no longer needed permission to exist. Arian knew the world might never fully forgive her, but maybe that was the point. She wasn't chasing absolution anymore. She was chasing peace, And for the first time in a long time, peace didn't feel impossible. It felt earned.